Hello, my name is Rob, and welcome to the Geek Show for another episode of Alternatives 2, in which we take a look at a upcoming high-profile release and suggest some alternatives for you to play instead of it. Today, it's the turn of Mafia Definitive Edition, which is due out in a few days, and it's part of a trilogy of reassessments, really. Mafia Definitive Edition is a full-blooded remake from Hangar 13. Mafia 2 got a remaster and left a lot of the sort of old, broken gameplay loops and bugs, resulting in it getting kind of a mauling critically. And number 3 is the only experience I have with the series, and that got a little bit of few added extras with people who already bought the game. Number 3 is kind of representative of the series as a whole, as far as I understand it. In my experience, that game, the world that's set up in post-Vietnam New Orleans was very, very characterful, great to spend time in, full of personality, but there's nothing in it. The gameplay and the cover shooter, the way you negotiated the worlds, and the character models, all fantastic, but the character missions are repetitive as all hell, and it's hard to maintain interest for the sort of length of a extended GTA-style crime game, and hopefully they fix that for Mafia Definitive Edition and give it a bit more flavour to the world rather than just making it look nice for 2020. So let's get into some alternatives to Mafia Definitive Edition, shall we? Number 1 is Sleeping Dogs, which is a game which I believe was slept on far too much by far too many. As evidenced by the fact that its developer, United Front Games, went out of business a few years back, and it wasn't really reported on as far as I recall. Now, Sleeping Dogs is set in Hong Kong. You play Wei Shen, who is undercover in the Sun On Ye Mafia family, or Triad family, to give it its right terminology, and it's really interesting on a level of it not just being Mafia is a type of crime family, Italian-American crime family, or Italian crime family, and let's just have the Japanese equivalent, and that's that, the Chinese equivalent, and that's that, the this and that equivalent, and that's that, because that would be very, very boring. What I think they do interestingly with Sleeping Dogs is they take the Triad and they basically craft a 20-hour or so campaign in which it plays like a mid-80s to late 90s Hong Kong action movie, the sort which would have been made by John Woo and friends, which I have to reference just for the sake of it. Stranglehold, the game that John Woo was actually in charge of with Chow Yun-fat back in 2006, 2007 I think it was, which has been unduly forgotten, much like Sleeping Dogs. But what I really like about Sleeping Dogs is the duality of it. On the one hand, there is the crime game, which gives you lots of things to do. There's like fight clubs, and there's also races and side missions and missions that you do for people on the street to get your face up, which is very important in Asian society, keeping face. Also, you have to be a cop. You do cop missions, there's missions, like cop sort of face missions, I guess you'd call them, missions throughout the game where you have to keep up appearances as a policeman. So it has that sense of two personalities to it, which keeps it fresh, keeps it interesting, and sort of keeps that idea that I mentioned with Mafia, that it's an open world game with nothing to do. Furthermore, it's got different gameplay styles, Sleeping Dogs. You have the shooting, which honestly is nowhere near as good as Mafia's, not even remotely close. But the martial arts, the fight scenes, which you learn different techniques by getting jade statues and returning them to your master, gives you different techniques to learn. But that plays a bit like Batman Arkham games, really, in that the characters glow red and you counter them and you attack with square and combinations of square. It's really fun, not so much in the story. The story is about getting revenge on Wei Shen's dead sister. No nice way to talk about that. But the way it plays is great fun. It's got a few blink and you'll miss it DLCs. The first one is about hopping vampires. Have you played, or seen I should say, 1980s comedy horror Mr. Vampire, you will be familiar with hopping vampires. And the second one is about cultists. Neither really outstay their welcome. The second one, Yero the Snake with the cultists, is a little bit more light-hearted, but you know, it is what it is. And that's Sleeping Dogs, that's choice number 1. Choice number 2 is Bully, and I have to bring up Bully because honestly, I could have said alternatives to Mafia, just play Grand Theft Auto, and if you haven't played Grand Theft Auto at this point, you're not gonna, honestly. So Bully is a nice alternative to both Mafia and this style of game in general, really, because it's not about violence, it's not about horrible things, really. Like, it's not got missions of torture, all sorts of horrific stuff happening. You are Jimmy Hopkins, and you are a transfer student who's been kicked out of a lot of schools before, and even though it had to be renamed Canis Canem Edit because a lot of people in the UK were calling it a bullying simulator, which it wasn't, what it actually is basically another Grand Theft Auto game, but it's in the schoolyard. The gangs and ethnically diverse and community diverse. There are the nerds, the jocks, so on and so forth. You don't have a variety of cars which you steal. You get bikes. You don't have side missions. Well, you do have side missions. That's not what I mean. The stuff that fill out the world, make the world more interesting. You have to go to lessons. You've got a curfew. You've got all sorts of interesting things happening in and around the world. And it keeps things fresh in this type of game, which honestly, open world crime games get very, very repetitive. So a game which basically says, yes, we can do it this way, but let's do it another way. Hugely different flavour and true alternative to, I guess, in the spirit of the series. And the last one is Watch Dogs. Now, Watch Dogs is, well, the original Watch Dogs, anyway, is much like, well, Mafia, in that it's a very, very serious game built in the gangland world, very authentic. It has, like, the hacking system, but the one that I'm going to talk about in particular is Watch Dogs 2, which is a breath of fresh air. It's full of colour. It doesn't take anything too seriously, in the sense that even the story it doesn't take too seriously. Because honestly, I've not played it last year, and I can't remember anything really except the mission types. And the mission types is why I really wanted to include this, because it's not gangland revenge. It's not whatever, killing this guy, whacking this guy, going there, saving this person, taking over that territory and making a profit. You have a mission where you hack NASA, basically. You got a mission at Google. You got all sorts of interesting types of mission within this type of game, which just twist it slightly to make it a little bit subversive, in the way that Grand Theft Auto was. Yeah, was. I can't remember 5 being that subversive, to be honest. But it's interesting in the colour, in the playfulness, in the fact that he is one for fans of 1990s trash movies which have dated so badly. You actually hack the planet late on in Watch Dogs 2. And let's tie it to Mafia in another way. Mafia has characters that reoccur throughout the series. Characters in 2 supporting characters in number 3, for example. That is also true in Watch Dogs. You get characters popping up from the first game, including the main character in a side mission quest line, and one of the major supporting characters too, and it seems to be carrying through. And there's one coming up later on in the year, Legion too. But number 2 is the one what I'm talking about today, and that is it for alternatives to Mafia Definitive Edition. So just to run through them again: Sleeping Dogs, Bully, aka Canis Canem Edit, and Watch Dogs 2. And the next alternatives to video is going to be Star Wars Squadrons with the other Rob. But until next time, thank you for watching. We've been the Geek Show. See you next time.
Trashing! Hack the planet! Hack the planet!
Shut up and get in the car!
Hack the planet! Hack the planet!